Hey guys, tonight we step into a place where time clings to your skin like wet linen, and the air smells like hot iron and old forgotten screams. You're not on your comfy pillow anymore. Instead, you wake up on a stone floor, your ankles shackled wrists cuffed behind your back, and your mouth tasting of metal like someone swapped your toothpaste for melted copper. Torches flicker along cracked brick walls, casting jittery shadows that look a little too alive. This, my brave night owl, is a Qin Dynasty holding cell. And you, well, let's just say, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I want to see who's braving this journey after midnight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You try to move, but the iron cage you're in creaks like a reluctant door hinge. Every breath you take draws in a mix of mildew ash and something far less poetic, let's call it aggressively organic. You're not alone either. Just beyond your field of vision, someone whimpers. Another coughs wet and rasping. A rat skitters across the floor, so bloated and confident it might as well be your new landlord. It's 221 BCE. Qin Shi Huang has declared himself the first emperor of a unified China. Sounds majestic, right? Except his version of unification includes strict legalist doctrine, zero tolerance for dissent, and a particular fondness for punishment that doesn't just silence enemies, it makes an example of them. Not the kind of group project leader you'd want in your 8th grade science class. The cell you're in isn't some isolated fluke. It's part of a sprawling penal system designed to do more than detain, it breaks people. The walls are thick with years of screams absorbed like moisture. These aren't just punishment chambers, they're stages for state-sponsored theatre. And you've landed yourself a lead role. A pair of guards shuffle past their armour, clinking like utensils in a drawer. They barely glance at you. To them, you're another tick on the list. Maybe you said the wrong thing. Maybe you forgot to bow. Maybe someone accused you of possessing a banned book, which during the Qin Dynasty could mean literally anything not officially approved by the regime. Remember, this is the dynasty famous for burning books and burying scholars' light bedtime reading, I know. Now what's fascinating is that Qin torture wasn't just about inflicting pain. It was a layered message, an equation of obedience. Historians still argue whether the sheer scale of brutality was a calculated psychological tactic, or simply a byproduct of legalist extremism gone unchecked. But what's clear, pain equals control. And control, that's the Empire's favourite bedtime story. Your cage rattles, you're being moved. A guard unlocks the rusted mechanism with a clunk that echoes like a bell tolling for your future. They don't speak to you, just yank you forward with all the compassion of a laundry machine mid-spin. As you're dragged through the corridor, your bare feet slap against the cold stone slick with, well, let's just say it's not condensation. The hallway opens into a larger chamber lit by torches arranged in perfect symmetry. Stone benches line the walls. At the centre stands a strange contraption, wooden beams intersecting like a giant bird trap. One prisoner sits inside it, body folded and locked by the structure's angles, neck strained back unnaturally. His eyes are open, his mouth too, but nothing comes out. Welcome to the tiger cage. No tigers involve, just you wooden planks and physics used as punishment. The cage is angled in such a way that the prisoner can't stand, can't sit, and can't quite lie down. It doesn't sound horrific until you realise the position compresses the chest, slows the breath, and after a few hours turns muscles to hot jelly. This, by the way, isn't even the main event. It's the waiting room of pain. Just beyond this, a series of tools hang from the wall. Hooks, clubs, iron pokers. Each tool has a specific job. There's a branding rod shaped like the imperial seal. There's a weight system for stretching joints. One odd-looking device resembles salad tongs, but historically, they were used to crush fingers. Efficient if you're into that sort of thing. And then there's the cage you're placed into waist-high, made of bamboo slats tied tight with sinew. You're forced into a crouch, and the top is locked down so your head's wedged into your knees. Not painful yet, just inconvenient, like trying to nap in a shopping cart. But time here is a multiplier. Minutes become hours. Muscles tremble. You sweat into your own shins. The stink rises fast. Some say Qin engineers designed these holding devices to squeeze the mind as much as the body. Others believe the goal was to confuse prisoners before formal sentencing. Historians still argue whether these pre-torture placements were officially part of punishment or just creative liberties taken by overzealous wardens. Either way, you're now artfully folded like a haunted origami crane. A young assistant scribe walks in barefoot, nervous and carrying a scroll. He eyes you like a science fair project that might bite. In Qin bureaucracy, everything is documented. Your offense, your arrest, the number of times you blinked while being questioned. Legalism thrives on paperwork. If fear is the body, documentation is the soul. Curious detail prisoners weren't always told what they were accused of. The goal was confession. The more detailed, the better. And if the accused couldn't supply details, well, the torture technician's interrogation facilitator was there to help jog the memory. Like a very sadistic life coach. A bell rings outside. Somewhere another group is being herded. Maybe rebels, maybe farmers, maybe the guy who stepped on the wrong official's robe. The lines between crime and punishment blur here. Sometimes punishment comes first, then a charge is tailored to match. And yet in this terrifying order, there's beauty. The craftsmanship of the torture devices, the geometric perfection of the cells, the silence between screams, almost meditative. Like the Empire wants your last thoughts to be about its efficiency. Someone behind you starts humming. You don't turn around, you can't. But it's a tune, oddly upbeat. Prison folk songs were a thing. Catchy rhymes, some mocking the emperor, others giving coded advice how to breathe through pain, how to survive the first lash, how to find peace in the dark. Some of these songs survived through generations, woven into lullabies and work chants. No one sings them for comfort now, but they're a kind of ghost, a reminder that even in the most brutal systems, people find slivers of rebellion. The lights dim slightly. A guard removes a torch. You're left in partial darkness, the bamboo pressing into your skin like judgment. No one's speaking. No one needs to. Because in this place, silence is not peace. It's preparation. Your joints have been locked in that bamboo cage long enough that they've forgotten how freedom feels. Each second hums like a plucked string stretched to its limit, vibrating with tension. But there's no melody here, just the slow, maddening rhythm of institutional cruelty. And then movement. The top of the cage is unfastened, not with mercy, but with boredom. A guard grunts as he yanks you out like a sack of damp rice. Your legs fail beneath you. Naturally, he doesn't care. You're dragged again, your toes drawing wobbly brush strokes of dirt across the floor. Where are you going now? Somewhere worse. As you're pulled past more chambers, the smell changes. Less decay, more ink. You're entering the administrative wing. Stone turns to lacquered wood. Scrolls line the walls like ancient code legalist doctrine in all its painful precision. This is where Qin Shi Huang's empire begins its torture, not in dungeons, but in philosophy. Legalism. Not the most comforting bedtime word, huh? It's the backbone of the Qin Dynasty's authority, a system that says human nature is selfish and chaotic, and must be restrained by strict laws and severe punishment. You know, the kind of worldview that turns jaywalking into a blood sport. Forget Confucian ideals of morality or Taoist thoughts about harmony. Legalism says control people with fear, not inspiration. It's like trying to raise a child using only traffic tickets and haunted dolls. You're hauled into a chamber with red columns and a floor so clean it glints. That's not for sanitation, it's so blood doesn't stick. Sitting behind a low table is a magistrate in embroidered robes. His face is unreadable, not blank, just uninterested. You're not a person, You're a case file with limbs. He reads from a bamboo slip, murmuring your name, alleged crime location of arrest, and wait, what was your crime again? Oh, right. You don't know. But he does. Or he pretends to. Disruption of public harmony, he says flatly. That could mean sneezing during a procession, or looking the wrong way at a soldier. It's vague by design, a legalist classic. When laws are broad and brutal, everyone is always guilty. Just makes things simpler, doesn't it? You're instructed not to speak unless asked. You nod. Mistake. You were not asked. A wooden rod smacks your shoulder just hard enough to teach you the rhythm of this place. The room has rules and you're already a step behind the beat. The magistrate lectures, but not at you, at the scribe sitting nearby who scratches characters with a sharp brush. He talks about the mandate of law, the need for uniformity, and the importance of deterrence. Your background noise to a philosophy lesson. Your limbs ache, your stomach growls, and you're reduced to punctuation in a legalist monologue. Here's the thing, Qin justice didn't hinge on fairness. It was about stability. Fear brings order. Order preserves power. The punishment system, not a glitch, a feature. Magistrates weren't measured by compassion, but by how efficiently they processed criminals and maintained societal terror. Historians still argue whether the early Qin leadership truly believed in legalism or simply used it as the sharpest tool in their authoritarian toolbox. Did they follow Han Fei's teachings out of conviction? Or was it all just convenient cruelty? The debate rages on like a slow-boiling stew, but in this room, it hardly matters. You're already simmering. Your trial ends with a stamp, a literal one. The magistrate presses a seal into red paste and slaps it onto a slip that lists your punishment. It's immediate. No appeals, no delays. You're sentenced before you can feel your legs again. A trio of characters marks your fate. Cangue detainment escalating correction. Translation public humiliation first, then we raise the stakes. The cangue is one of the Qin's most humiliating and oddly efficient tools. Imagine a wooden collar, but not a stylish one. This one's roughly carved four-sided and weighs as much as a small goat. It rests on your shoulders like a punishment sandwich board. Once it's clamped shut, you can't feed yourself, scratch your nose, or sleep without a spectacular crick in your neck. You're paraded through town like an ugly, angry art installation. And that's exactly what happens next. You're marched through the streets of Xianyang, the Qin capital, your cangue bouncing slightly with every unsteady step. It's a strange blend of exposure and isolation. People stare, but no one touches you. No one helps. Some kids giggle. A few old women mutter. But most just avoid eye contact as if pity might be contagious. You're not just a criminal. You're a reminder, obey, or this could be you. Every part of this spectacle is by design. Legalist governance adored public punishment. It wasn't just about discipline, it was theatre, a way to show power through passive participation. You in your heavy wooden frame are a travelling warning label. There's a dark little tidbit here. Some versions of the cangue came with inscriptions, your name, your crime, even moral advice etched into the wood. Li Wei filial disrespect. Let this be a lesson, like a medieval Yelp review of your soul. One fringe scholar even proposed that some wealthier families would bribe officials to make the writing more poetic, as if shame could be softened by better branding. You're stationed near the market where the scent of roasted yams tortures you more than anything physical so far. You can't eat. Your arms don't reach. Some prisoners starved in these contraptions not from neglect, but from public indifference. That's the real horror. Your survival hinges on strangers' generosity. And that's in short supply. You last a day, maybe two. Time is a blur of heat wood splinters and that awful itching spot right between your shoulder blades that no amount of telekinetic willpower can reach. Finally, someone approaches. Not with food, with rope. They drag you back not to the cell, but to the next phase, escalating correction. Sounds almost scientific, doesn't it? You're led into another chamber, this one, darker with just one lantern swaying from the ceiling. A single bench, a pole, a thick leather strap. This is where they re-educate you. A soldier steps forward holding what looks like a polished bamboo staff. Not heavy, not serrated, just smooth, flexible, and unforgiving. The first strike comes without warning. It hits your calves and sends a line of fire up your spine. The second lands across your back. The third, well, it blurs with the rest. These beatings weren't meant to kill. Not always. They were carefully measured. 15 lashes for disobedience, 20 for theft, 40 for defiance. The numbers change based on the season, the magistrate, the political climate, or whether someone had a bad lunch. And this is important. Pain was viewed as purifying. Your body becomes the chalkboard. The law writes its lesson across your skin. Eventually, the punishment ends, not because they found mercy, but because they're done using you as a demonstration. You're hauled back to your cell, dumped like old laundry, and left to marinate in bruises and legalist justice. You lie there blinking at the stone ceiling, listening to other prisoners moan or mumble in half-conscious prayer. The air is thick with sweat and fear, but there's something else too, certainty. Not the warm kind, the cold kind. The kind that tells you the system won't stop. It never rests. You've felt its teeth. Now it waits for your next mistake. And make no mistake, you will make one. It's quiet again, well, except for the wet cough from the guy in the corner, whose lungs probably packed up during the last dynasty. You lie on the cold floor, every muscle sulking in protest. The bruises from the bamboo beating have blossomed into a deep, almost artistic shade of purple blue, like your body's trying out abstract expressionism. And your cangue still there, but cracked now, like it's mocking your fragility with its splinters. You're not alone in this chamber, but no one speaks. They just stare at the stone. Occasionally someone shifts the rustle of fabric, echoing like a shout. You'd think isolation meant silence, but in here, even breathing becomes choreography. No sudden movements, no noise, just invisible rules thick in the air. The guards return, not with food, not with water, with something worse. This time, they're not dragging, they're lifting. You're yanked up by the shoulders joints popping like stale dumplings. You're shuffled past more holding cells through a short hallway painted with flickering torchlight and into a courtyard. Yes, an outdoor space. Trees line the wall. The sun glints off pebbles. A small miracle. Not really. In the center stands a wooden frame. Upright. Thick beams. A cross between a ladder and a scaffold. Meet the cangues, or interrogation frame. Not the worst contraption in the Qin arsenal, but it doesn't need to be. It's not the object that breaks people, it's the application. They tie your arms high above your head, forcing you onto your tiptoes. Ankles start trembling instantly, and then nothing. No questions, no screaming accusations, just waiting. This is a patience game. How long until your legs give out and your arms threaten to leave your body entirely? Historians still argue whether this frame originated in the Qin-era itself, or was borrowed from earlier warring states' techniques and simply perfected into a bureaucratic routine. Either way, it's genius in its cruelty. No knives, no blood, just gravity exhaustion and an overwhelming urge to lie down for about 3 centuries. A guard leans in and mutters something low. You can't hear the words, but the grin tells you it isn't a bedtime story. Your breathing grows shallow heart, trying to punch through your ribs. Muscles burn in new, exciting places. Even your bones seem annoyed. You try to adjust your footing, but each shift only makes things worse. It's here, suspended and stretched, that the interrogation begins. Not verbal, physical. The magistrate doesn't return. Instead, a junior officer reads from a parchment your charge again, and a list of questions. Questions you can't answer. Not because you won't, because they don't make sense. Who organized your sedition? You stole rice, maybe. Or someone said you did. Now you're apparently part of a revolution. Here's the catch: under Qin law, confessions were golden. A signed confession could seal a case in minutes, which meant you'd better confess, and if you didn't, they'd help you remember. The officer gestures. A different guard steps forward holding something that looks like two flat paddles made of wood and wrapped in leather. Your arms are still tied, but your toes barely touch the ground now. And those paddles, they're for your feet. Yes, foot whipping. You'd think, after the bamboo rod, you'd be used to it. But this is different. It targets nerve endings, balance, the very foundation of your body. One strike to the arch sends a message to your ears fall. Another to the heel makes your spine spasm. They're not aiming to draw blood. They're aiming to erase your center. One quirky record from the time buried deep in commentaries by later Han scribes mentions a man who lost the ability to walk properly for the rest of his life after just 1 foot beating. Not because of injury, because of how his brain rewired the pain. Like a phantom limb, but crueler. Your own mind is drifting now, trying to escape the body. You think of fish ponds, of dumplings steaming over open coals, of that one time you stubbed your toe and thought nothing could hurt more than this. Oh, how innocent you were. Eventually the questions stop, not because they're satisfied, because you pass out. And when you wake up, you're in a cell again, not the old one. A different cell, smaller, hotter. The walls are closer, the air thicker. Your ankles have been bound this time not with ropes, but with wooden blocks. They're designed to prevent you from standing, which is ironic considering your feet wouldn't carry you anyway. Someone's humming nearby, an older prisoner. He seems unbothered, but his voice cracks in a way that says he's been here longer than the dynasty itself. You knew, he whispers. You don't answer. You don't want to. But your silence doesn't discourage him. They use the frame on you, huh? Happens to all of us, he says. Then he chuckles. You get used to it, sort of. Not the pain, just the waiting. Another prisoner mutters something about Ying Xing punishment stones. Your ears perk up. Punishment stones. Oh yes, you'll get to know those soon. But for now, you rest. Not by choice. Your body has staged a mutiny. Even your thoughts are rebelling. You drift in and out, time bending like heat on a summer road. And somewhere in the haze, you begin to hear something new. Not words, not whips. A low grinding sound, like something heavy being dragged across the floor. Later that night, the guards return again. They're carrying 2 flat stones each about the size of a dinner plate, but denser than your average sibling argument. These are the yingxing, the hard punishment weights. They place one on your lap. The other, they strap it to your chest. The pressure is immediate. It's like your organs are being politely but firmly asked to shift positions. The idea was simple. Immobilize the body. Weaken the breath. Let the weight do the talking. This wasn't always a standalone punishment. It was often used during long interrogations. Instead of shouting or thrashing, you were just pressed, like a flower, like a crushed scroll. Some scholars believe this method was borrowed from earlier Zhou penal codes where stones were used for judicial balance. Others argue the Qin weaponized it for sheer psychological torment. The debate remains unresolved largely because no one who wrote about it ever had to sit through it. And you sit and sit and sit. The weight changes your breath. Shorter, shallower. Your chest rises less each time. Your ribs start to cramp. Your lower back screams. But there's nowhere to move. One prisoner whispers that the stones are enchanted. You'd laugh, but there's no breath for it. Eventually, mercifully, the stones are removed, but only because you're scheduled for something new tomorrow. The guards say it with no emotion, like it's a dentist appointment. But the term makes your blood run colder than the stones ever could ink branding. And just like that, you miss the foot paddles. By morning, if it even is morning. Given how time slithers here, you've made peace with the idea that you're no longer a person. Not really. You're more of a sketch now, an outline being gradually filled in with bruises, sweat, and bureaucratic cruelty. The ink is next. Literally. Your arms ache from the ghost of yesterday's suspension. Your chest is still patterned with phantom pressure from the yingxing stones. And your feet. Let's just say they're not exactly up for a brisk jog. The guards come again. Same blank faces, same creaking sandals. This time, they carry a small tray with brushes, a bowl of black ink, and something sharp tucked just beneath a cloth. You know better than to hope it's a pen. You're dragged out into another courtyard smaller than the last. The sun stings your eyes like truth stings an emperor. In the center sits a squat, hunched official, more scribe than soldier. His robes are pristine, like he never so much as thinks about dust. On the table before him, thin bamboo slips with names, charges, and sentences etched into their grain. He's not looking at you, he's looking at your forehead. Now remember that awkward high school ID photo, multiply that feeling by 1,000, subtract all human rights, and you're close. This is the branding clerk. The Qin Dynasty, in all its harsh administrative glory, didn't just keep records of crimes, they made you into the record. Welcome to the inky horror of Mo Xing tattooing of the face. Mainstream scholars agree this was one of the most commonly used punishments for minor and mid-level crimes. Less permanent than amputation, more lasting than flogging. You steal once, boom. Your skin now shouts thief before your mouth even opens. The branding clerk lifts his brush, dips it in the ink, and traces a character across your forehead. Slowly, carefully, almost artistically. It's oddly meditative. For him anyway. Historians still argue whether these characters were always specific to the crime, or if sometimes they were chosen for maximum humiliation. A scribe from the Han Dynasty claims one unfortunate prisoner was marked with the word stupid. Harsh even by ancient standards. Once the outline is drawn, the real fun begins. The sharp tool under the cloth. A kind of stylus. It's not heated, it's used to cut. With a steady hand and no warning, the clerk begins carving over the inked lines, slicing the character directly into your flesh. The ink seeps into the wound, and just like that, the character is embedded, not just symbolically, but physically. A forever stamp. It's not unlike a modern tattoo, except, without consent, anesthesia, or regret-fueled laser removal. Your skin burns. Your face contorts. And still the clerk hums a little tune like he's working on pottery. Your blood mingles with the ink, and for a strange moment, you feel like a page in a manuscript, a cautionary tale being written in real time. And this isn't a one-size-fits-all punishment. The Qin had a lovely tiered system. First-time offenders might receive small marks on the hands or arms. Repeat offenders face marks, often multiple. Political traitors. Well, sometimes they skipped the ink and went straight to chopping things off, but more on that later. Your particular character, as you glimpse it briefly in a polished bronze plate, means rebellious. How ironic. You never rebelled against anything except maybe your neighbor's goat. They bandage the wound but loosely. It's meant to scar. Infection is expected. A fever might even earn you a spot in the infirmary or a shallow grave. At this point, it's a coin toss. You're sent back to the cell head pounding like it's hosting a drum circle. Another prisoner glances at your new forehead inscription and nods solemnly. Ah, he says you've been promoted. You lie down face away and try not to cry. Not because it hurts, though it does. Because it's permanent. A walking accusation. A billboard of shame that says, this one doesn't belong. You think about what that means, not just in prison but outside, if you ever leave. If. Because here's the truth, tattooed criminals in Qin society weren't simply punished, they were marked for exclusion. Markets wouldn't serve them. Families disowned them. Officials ignored their pleas. It's a brand that outlives the sentence. One scholar compares it to social death. Bit dramatic, sure, but not entirely wrong. And there's another layer, the ink itself. Some sources claim the Qin used a mixture of pine soot vinegar and plant dye, something that would irritate the skin further and ensure maximum permanence. Others say human ash was involved, probably apocryphal, hopefully. Still, as you lie awake, every throb of your brow feels darker somehow. A few hours or days pass, then comes the next transfer. You're brought to an indoor chamber this time. A long hall with cubicles. Rows of them separated by thin partitions. This is not a punishment area. It's worse. It's the registry. See, the Qin were meticulous about records. If you were punished, it was documented. Not just on slips of bamboo, but through oral accounts, public posting boards, and even statues. There's a fringe theory, quirky but unproven, that some towns kept effigies of branded criminals near the gates as warnings. Like creepy scarecrows with backstories. Here a scribe interviews you, painfully slowly. Name, origin, offense, date, branding character. He records your words with a bamboo stylus, dipping it in ink after each stroke. He doesn't look up once. You could say your name is Emperor McChicken and he'd still nod and write it down. Paperwork must flow. You're given a slate token, a Qin-era prisoner ID strung on a thin rope and hung around your neck. It contains symbols denoting your rank offense and labor designation. Labor. Yep, that's coming. Before you can process what labor might involve, they bring you to the bathing room. Not out of kindness. It's regulation. Every branded prisoner must be scrubbed before transport. Part hygiene, part humiliation. They shave your head, pour buckets of cold water, scrub your arms until the skin feels like sandpaper. A young attendant mutters something about lice reduction. Gee, thanks. After the bath, they dress you in the standard grey tunic of the Zhu-Ren, the criminal class. It's rough-woven and deliberately shapeless, designed to erase identity except for the brand on your face. You think of home, of how people might look at you now, of whether your sister would even recognize you, whether she'd want to. But there's no time for spiraling, because just outside the bathing hall a new figure waits. Not a guard, a labor overseer. He taps a list and grunts North Wall duty. Tomorrow, be ready. You want to ask North Wall of what, but your lips are cracked. Your voice feels borrowed. All you manage is a nod, and deep down you know, wall duty doesn't mean painting. The next morning arrives with no fanfare, just the same clatter of sandals, a rough nudge to the ribs, and a bowl of millet gruel that's more memory than meal. You're marched out alongside a handful of other branded prisoners, each of you wearing the same stiff grey tunic, the same haunted look, and the same sinking feeling in your gut. North Wall duty. It sounds straightforward, almost benign if you squint. But as the ox-drawn cart creaks past rows of scorched fields and watchtowers, the real meaning slowly reveals itself: the Great Wall, or at least the Qin Dynasty's rough-cut version of it, stretching across the northern borders of the empire like some hulking unfinished spine. This wall is more than stone and mortar. It's where the condemned go to disappear slowly. Labourers die faster here than they do in the torture pits, just more quietly. Historians still argue whether Qin Shi Huang's wall project was a visionary act of military genius or an ego-fueled death sentence for thousands. The truth probably lies somewhere in between, like most bureaucratic nightmares dressed up as legacy. By midday you arrive at the construction site. Dust curls up from the earth in soft, choking clouds. The sun is merciless, like a tax collector with something to prove. Overseers bark orders in sharp syllables, snapping whips more for effect than contact, though contact happens often enough. You're handed a woven basket. No explanation. Just fill. Stones. And that's your introduction to forced labour in the Qin Empire. Your task is simple, soul-crushing repetition. You lift heavy stones from a pile, stagger them over to a designated zone, and drop them into place. The pile never shrinks. Your arms never stop shaking. You're given water, but only enough to prevent collapse. Hunger claws at your gut in long, boring waves. Here's a mainstream historical fact to chew on between grunts. Archaeologists estimate that up to 300,000 labourers, many of them convicts like you, were conscripted to build the early iterations of the wall. It wasn't the sleek dragon-like form you picture today, but more of a patchwork of rammed earthwood and stones stacked by sheer willpower and the looming promise of corporal punishment. Punishment, by the way, is always nearby. Slip up once, you're flogged with a split bamboo rod called a cangue. Get caught slacking. They tie your hands behind your back and hang a weighted pole from your elbows, essentially turning your body into a living coat rack of shame. Now here's a quirky tidbit that doesn't make it into many textbooks. Some prisoners reportedly sang while working. Not joyfully, of course. These were dirge-like chants, with lyrics about death home and rotten millet. It wasn't entertainment, it was survival. If your lips were moving in rhythm, the overseer was less likely to think you were slacking. It's during one of these back-breaking afternoons that you see your first real collapse. A man older with streaks of white in his stubble goes down hard face first into the dust. No scream. No fight left in him. The overseer strides over and taps the man's back with his bamboo rod. No response. He nudges the ribs harder. Still nothing. Then comes the ding with the punishment pit. 2 other prisoners are summoned to carry the collapsed man toward a sunken square of earth surrounded by sharpened stakes. You follow not by choice, but because your job is near it. Inside the pit, heat flies and silence. The man is tied to a central post and left in the sun for hours. No water, no shade, not even the dignity of privacy. The idea isn't to kill yet. It's to threaten the rest of you. The pit says, "See what quitting gets you." Eventually, someone pours a bucket of water over the man's head, and he sputters back to life. No apology is required, just a return to work. That night, back in the labor camp dormitory, a series of wooden sheds barely tall enough to stand in, you lie in a tangle of limbs and breath and dust. Sleep doesn't come easy, partly because the straw bedding smells like old feet, and partly because the man beside you won't stop mumbling about snakes, real or imagined. The guards make their rounds counting each prisoner with a bored grunt. 1, 2, 3, still present, still branded. You hear whispers from the corner, an older inmate explaining to a younger one about the cart. Apparently, there's a special wooden cart used once a week to collect those who can no longer work. The sick, the weak, the quietly dead. They're loaded up at dawn and hauled away never to be seen again. Officially, they're relocated to less strenuous labor. Unofficially, no one asks. Now you may be wondering, why go through all this trouble for a wall? Why not just dig a moat, build a fence, or hear me out? Not anger every nomadic tribe north of the empire. Well, according to Qin logic, a wall meant security. It meant power. It meant you were serious about borders. And when you rule with legalist ideology, where law and order are the only flavors on the menu, a wall becomes more than just bricks. It's a symbol of divine authority, of centralized control, of Qin Shi Huang's obsession with leaving a scar on the world that says I was here. You're helping build that scar, one blister at a time. Days blur together. The rhythm of labor becomes its own form of hypnosis. Lift, carry, drop. Lift, carry, drop. Occasionally you spot new arrivals, fresh-faced prisoners who still believe there's an exit plan. Give it a week. They'll catch on. One evening during a rare moment of rest, you speak to a man with a crooked nose and an even more crooked grin. He tells you about a secret tunnel someone tried digging a few years back. It collapsed after 10 feet. Still, the attempt became legend, a bedtime story for the damned. He also tells you about the Watcher. Apparently, one overseer is known for selecting a random prisoner each night and watching them while they sleep. Just stands there, silent, arms crossed. No reason. No words. Just watches. You're skeptical until that night when you wake up to the sound of sandals scraping nearby. And sure enough, someone's standing at the foot of your shed, watching. No movement, just presence. You blink and they're gone. Maybe it's exhaustion. Maybe it's real. You don't ask. Because asking gets you noticed. By the end of your first full week, your hands are cracked open, your shoulders feel stapled in place, and your branded forehead itches like it's growing mold. You hear rumors of rebels in the West, whispers that someone somewhere is planning to overthrow the Qin. But those are just whispers. Here, the only revolution is whether or not you'll make it through another day without vomiting up your spleen. Still, a strange thing begins to happen. You stop dreaming of freedom. Not because you've given up well, maybe partly, but because your mind starts playing tricks. You begin dreaming of the wall, not as a place, but as a person. A massive stone-faced judge endlessly rising, calling you back to work, even in sleep. One prisoner claims the wall speaks, that it hums during sandstorms and sighs when someone dies on its watch. Another prisoner swears he saw a ghost on the ramparts, a builder from centuries past still carrying his last stone, still trying to finish a task that was never meant to end. Historians still argue whether the Qin wall actually achieved any strategic value during its initial construction. Some believe it was more for show than substance, a theatrical flex. But from where you're standing, covered in dirt scar tissue, and whatever that smell is, it's as real as the ink on your forehead. And it's not done with you yet. You wake up coughing again. Not from illness exactly, but from the fine dust that blankets your lungs each night, like a second skin. The air in the labor camp is dry, acrid, full of crushed stone, and that musky scent of unwashed bodies baked by the sun. You've stopped trying to scratch the grime off your skin. It always comes back like the weight of everything else out here. Your morning begins not with shouting this time, but with silence. And somehow that's worse. When you shuffle outside with the others blinking into the thin light, something is different. The overseers are tense, standing rigid with their hands resting just a little too firmly on their clubs. You hear murmuring among the workers. The cart is late. Now the cart, if you remember, is the rolling coffin they load with the sick, the dead, and the disappointments. It's never late. Ever. But this morning, no rumble, no creak, no mules snorting in protest. Just the silence. And then the squeal. It's not animal, not human. Something in between, like a shriek that's been ground down by time. The cart arrives after all, only this time it carries something new. The iron cage. It's smaller than you expect, just large enough to fit a man if you crush him into himself like a frightened crab. And guess what? That's exactly the plan. The cage punishment was rare. Even among the Qin's collection of sadistic showpieces, this one carried special weight. It wasn't just about pain. It was about humiliation, exposure, and dread. Once inside, a prisoner could be left for hours or days, trapped in the sun, unable to stand, lie down or move without slicing themselves against the jagged iron bars. The scholars who have studied Qin legal records still argue whether this particular torture method was reserved for political dissenters or simply unlucky souls who annoyed the wrong guard. You're leaning toward the latter. They call for volunteers, which is code for you and also you. You're pointed at. So is a man named Liang, one of the stronger workers, but too loud. Too proud. He made a joke about an overseer's missing tooth last week. Now he gets a front row seat to medieval contortionism. Liang goes in first. He tries to laugh it off, but his voice shakes. The guards shove him down, folding his arms behind his knees and squeezing his shoulders inward until his ribs look like broken shutters. Then they lower the cage over him like a bell being placed on a dying candle. Your role, you get to carry the cage. 3 of you lifted on poles and parade Liang through the camp. His face pressed sideways against rusted iron, his eyes darting, searching for anything human. There's no privacy in this punishment. Everyone watches. Everyone learns. When the sun hits its highest point, they set the cage down on a raised stone platform and leave it there. You're dismissed with a grunt, but the sound of Liang's breath, shallow, ragged, stays in your ears long after. Back at the work site, the air feels heavier. Not because of the weather, but because everyone now knows the cage can show up on any morning, like a surprise party you desperately don't want. You get back to lifting stones, your muscles screaming like angry toddlers. Someone collapses again. This time, a younger guy, maybe 16. Still soft in the cheeks, still carrying the ghost of hope in his posture. He doesn't get the cage. He gets something different. The collar. It's deceptively simple. A thick iron ring bolted around the neck, weighted in front with a hanging chain. The chain isn't long enough to drag, but it's heavy enough to pull the head forward at all times. Just walking with it is a chore. Working a nightmare. You're told to watch him. If he stops moving, it's your job to report it. And if you don't, you get a collar too. A 2-for-1 deal courtesy of the Qin Dynasty's customer service department. Now, while Qin torture tools were infamously creative, the real genius was in the psychology. The methods weren't always about breaking your body, they were about breaking your sense of when you were broken. Not with a snap, but with a slow strategic spiral. Take, for instance, the silence game. Every few days, an overseer would declare a quiet hour where no one was allowed to speak, not even in whispers. If anyone broke the rule, the entire work group would be punished. Sometimes with beatings. Sometimes by being forced to carry giant logs back and forth across the same patch of dirt for hours. This game was designed to destroy trust. It made enemies out of neighbors, turned suspicion into habit. Now here's a quirky little footnote from Qin court documents. Some supervisors actually encouraged spies among the prisoners, offering slightly better rations or softer bedding in exchange for tattling. Imagine snitching for a half-rotten yam. Some did. One night as you lie curled beneath your tunic, you overhear a whisper. Two men talking in a dialect you don't fully understand, their voices low and quick. It sounds like a plan, maybe escape, maybe rebellion, maybe just dreaming out loud. You don't report it. But in the morning, both men are gone, transferred, the guard says with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Historians still debate how many prisoners actually died during the Qin's wall-building campaigns. Some say tens of thousands, others hundreds of thousands. The truth was never written in ink, it was buried under stone. You begin to understand the wall as something more than a structure. It's a mechanism, a vast breathing entity that chews people up, grinds them down, and folds them into its body. Every stone you lift feels like a gravestone. You start to wonder how many of them already are gravestones. There's a night when you wake up gasping. A nightmare. You were in the cage this time, but instead of watching from inside, you were watching yourself. Like a bad play you couldn't leave. Sweat clings to your body even though the night air is sharp and cool. You sit up, heart thudding, and there he is again. The Watcher. Same position, same blank face, same terrible silence. You don't blink this time. You stare back. Eventually he leaves, but the image stays. By your second week, the novelty of torture wears off. That sounds absurd, right? But truly, once you've seen enough broken noses, heard enough muffled screams, you develop a kind of numbness. Not because you're heartless, because your brain has decided it can't carry all that weight and still function. You find yourself envying the older prisoners, the ones with the dull eyes and mechanical movements. They've reached a stage beyond fear, a kind of grim enlightenment. Then comes a new rumor. One of the prisoners supposedly carved a map onto his thigh. Not with ink, but with a sharpened bone. Every line a scratch, every border a thin slice of skin. He believed he could navigate his way out using only that crude guide. The map was found, but not the man. Some say he escaped. Others say the guards ate the evidence. The idea of escape becomes both joke and fantasy. You whisper about it over your evening gruel in that strange twilight space between despair and delirium. Someone always points out the flaws, the guards, the wilderness, the branding on your forehead that makes hiding impossible. But still the talk continues, because dreaming in some ways is resistance. You start keeping count of what everything. Days worked, stones lifted, times the cage appears, times you think about screaming and don't. It becomes your secret calendar, your way of marking time, in a place designed to erase it. One evening, a rare gust of wind kicks up over the wall site, sending sand into your eyes and your mouth and between your teeth. You choke and laugh and cry all at once. Someone nearby mutters, "Even the sky's spitting on us." Another replies, "That's not spit. That's the ancestors trying to bury us faster." You'd laugh, but it's too close to true. Still that night, the stars peek through the dust for once. Clear, sharp, cold. You trace constellations with your finger, pretending you're somewhere else. Somewhere that doesn't smell like blood and limestone and lies. You don't believe in omens, not really. But the air feels different, charged, like something's coming, and it is. You don't hear the commotion at first, just a low hum in the distance like bees trapped in a jar, or voices trying not to be voices. You think maybe you're dreaming again, that strange half-dream where your limbs weigh 1,000 pounds, and you're always just about to fall through the floor. But then your eyes snap open. There's movement outside. Fast panicked, shadowy figures darting between tents, whispering too loudly. A clatter, a grunt, someone running, which is unusual, because no one runs unless there's fire blood or someone's being exceptionally foolish. You rise slowly, every joint complains. Your blanket, if you can call it that, is soaked in your sweat again, never from heat, always from tension. You push outside and the first thing you see is the cage, again. Only this time it's empty, lying on its side like a broken birdcage after a storm. 2 guards are down, one still groaning, the other too still to be groaning. You don't recognize the faces, but that doesn't matter. What matters is Liang remember him, Mr. Too Proud for his own good, is gone. Gone. No body, no blood. Just 2 guards who weren't paying attention and an empty cage that now looks like a statement, and not a subtle one. The camp buzzes louder like a disturbed hive. A runner sprints toward the officer's tent barefoot and wild-eyed. A horn blasts twice short sharp to signal alert. Everyone is ordered into a line. You feel like you're in school again, waiting for the teacher to decide who was chewing in class. Only this teacher carries a whip, and instead of a lecture, there's a list of names. Your name isn't called, this time, but the boy with the iron collar he is. They drag him forward. He doesn't resist. He barely reacts. There's a strange serenity on his face. Maybe because he's ready. Maybe because the collar's weight has finally pulled his mind inward where no guard can reach it. They don't ask questions. They just make an example. This time the punishment isn't the cage. It's the stocks. Specifically a version used by the Qin for disruptive subordinates, which can mean anything from plotting rebellion to sneezing too loudly near the emperor's name. The Qin did not mess around with hierarchy. The stocks are wooden thick, sanded down just enough not to leave splinters, but not enough to make it comfortable. Your ankles go in first, then your wrists, then the neck if they're really feeling creative. You've seen others confined that way for hours left, with flies nesting around their nostrils, the sun slowly boiling their skin. The boy is secured tightly, too tightly. He gasps as the top plank lowers, pinning his shoulders into place. Then silence. Not even a scream. He just stares forward, unmoving as if he's already elsewhere. Some prisoners say this kind of punishment is worse than whipping. At least with a whip there's a rhythm, a rise and fall. You can count the lashes, you can prepare. But with the stocks, time slows to a crawl and you feel every heartbeat like a drum in your ears. Historians still argue whether this type of stock confinement was standardized under Qin Shi Huang or implemented ad hoc by regional enforcers. Some believe it was part of a broader anti-corruption campaign that quickly mutated into a paranoia-fueled reign of cruelty. Others think it was just tradition, an old method from the Warring States period resurrected with bureaucratic flair. Either way, the message is clear. Liang escaped, so someone must suffer. Later, in a quieter moment, you ask an older prisoner how often escapes happen. He looks at you like you've just asked if the moon tastes like garlic. Then he says, 3 that I remember. None made it far. 1 turned himself in. Begged to come back. They made him a cook. He burned the rice. They killed him. So that's encouraging. But still, the story of Liang spreads like mold in a damp corner. Quiet, persistent, and hard to ignore. Some say he tunneled out. Others swear he bribed a guard with a jade ring smuggled in through his shoe heel. There's even a version where he seduced an official's wife, which, okay, is flattering if wildly optimistic. No one knows the truth, maybe not even Liang. But the fantasy becomes a balm, a distraction, something to hold in your mind while lifting another back-breaking slab of stone that may or may not be building a wall, or just a monument to suffering. You catch yourself daydreaming about forests, about fish cooked over a fire, about walking barefoot in a field without chains biting your ankles. Dangerous dreams. You're snapped out of it by the sound of iron. New arrivals. A fresh group of prisoners is being marched into camp, bound at the wrists with thick hemp rope, their faces a mix of confusion and resignation. Among them, scholars. You can tell by their posture, their robes ragged now, but once fine, and the way they hold their heads, like they're still giving lectures in their minds. The Qin did not like dissent, especially not the intellectual kind. These were the ones caught with forbidden texts, Confucian scrolls perhaps, or worse, found questioning imperial logic. That's a capital offense, but before death, there's always a detour through re-education, which brings us to one of the Qin's more experimental methods, the standing box. Not a cage, not stocks, This one's a coffin vertical just wide enough to fit a man, upright arms by his sides, no room to bend. The inside is lined with nails, not long enough to impale but sharp enough to discourage movement. You're told these scholars will each get a turn. Stand still for hours. Think deeply. Meditate on loyalty. Move too much bleed. There's irony here, you think. Men who once debated metaphysics in marble halls, now debating whether to shift their weight from left foot to right. It's a strange world. One of them meets your eyes, just for a second. And in that moment, you both understand you were different people once. Now you're just extensions of a system that rewards silence and punishes hope. The guards rotate the standing boxes through the camp, like ominous statues. Every night one disappears. Every morning another arrives, still warm. Some say it's worse than whipping. Others say it's just performance punishment as theatre. But either way it works. Morale drops. Voices fade. No one jokes anymore, not even under their breath. Even the whisperers go quiet. You start to feel something odd. Not pain exactly. Not fear either. Something deeper. Like being submerged too long, and your body starts to forget how air works. It's a kind of spiritual numbness, a greyness that coats your thoughts. You find yourself talking less, thinking slower. You eat because they tell you to. You sleep because there's nothing else to do. That's when the nightmares change. Now it's not you in the cage. It's you holding the whip. You wake in a panic, convinced you've done something horrible, that you've betrayed someone, that you enjoyed it. You haven't. Of course not. But the dream lingers, like the iron tang of blood on your tongue long after you've bitten your lip. That day they pull a surprise inspection. All prisoners must recite their assigned duties, in unison. Any error means lashes for everyone in the group. The guard walks past, slowly listening for cracks. One prisoner forgets a word. 6 lashes, no hesitation. You memorize everything after that. Every phrase, every rule, every tiny detail. You become the kind of prisoner who survives not by muscle, but by memory, not by defiance, but by anticipation. You learn the guard's patterns, who's likely to snap, who might let something slide. You know when the air shifts just enough to suggest rain and you hide your bedding before it soaks. These aren't victories, but they are something. One night someone hums, just one note, barely audible, but it's there, and no one reports it. You all just pretend you didn't hear. Sometimes that's all resistance is choosing not to notice. Morning creeps in, like a suspicious cat, slow, deliberate, and unwelcome. You feel it first in your lungs, the air no longer damp with night, but dry and sharp like old parchment. Then in your back, where the stone you've slept on has etched its shape into your spine. You roll over slowly, every movement and negotiation between aching joints and bruised flesh. Today feels different. Not because it's better, let's not get carried away, but because there's a scent on the wind you haven't caught before. It's sour, metallic, like rusted coins soaked in vinegar. You wrinkle your nose. Others smell it too. You can tell by the way heads start turning, like prairie dogs sniffing for a predator. Then you hear the dragging. Not boots, not chains, something heavier. Wood no too scratchy. Bone, don't be ridiculous. But then you see it. 2 guards hauling a large wheel, maybe 4 feet high, strapped to a post. It's a strange-looking thing, half cartwheel, half altar. Thick wooden spokes, darkened with years of use. Behind them, another group brings ropes, wedges, and, oh yes, a surgeon. You know he's a surgeon because his hands are too clean, and he isn't wearing armor. That, and the smug little toolkit he carries at his side like he's about to fix a squeaky chair instead of disassemble a person. The breaking wheel has arrived. You know the name before anyone says it out loud. Stories about this thing drifted in with the last batch of prisoners. They called it Qi Lun, which roughly translates to cartwheel punishment, but that's putting it mildly. Here's how it works, though. Honestly, you probably don't want to know. The condemned is strapped spread eagle to the wheel. Arms and legs lashed along the spokes. Not quite crucifixion, not quite the stocks, somewhere in between. Then, using a heavy iron bar, think sledgehammer, but without the subtlety, the enforcer targets the brakes, limbs, ribs, joints, clavicles. Not to kill. Oh no, that would be merciful. The goal is maximum fracture with minimum fatality. You're meant to stay alive, just less functional. Historians still argue whether the Qin truly institutionalized this method or simply inherited it from earlier kingdoms. Some say it was reserved for only the most traitorous of criminals. Others suspect it became more common during times of paranoia, say, during the emperor's obsession with alchemists and immortality seekers. When trust is low, creativity in punishment tends to rise. They say the wheel was used for the worst offenders, but no one ever defines worst. Today, that worst is an old man in tattered scholar robes, too thin to be threatening, too tired to stand without help. They say he was found with a bamboo scroll quoting Confucius. Apparently, that was enough. The guards are efficient. The man is silent. Even when they bind his limbs, he doesn't scream. His eyes don't plead. They observe. Like he's memorizing the moment for a book no one will ever read. You watch because you have to. There's no choice here. Everyone watches. The first strike lands on his right arm. You flinch. He doesn't. You're not sure if it's courage or catatonia. But whatever it is, it unsettles the guards. The next blows come faster, less rhythmic, more frantic, like they're trying to provoke something, anything, just to prove they're still in control. Someone behind you whispers he's not real. Someone else replies, he's already dead. Neither are true. You can see his chest rising, his eyes blinking against the dust. Eventually they stop. The surgeon checks for a pulse, finds one. Then they mount the wheel vertically and tie it upright to a frame near the north gate. The man dangles like a marionette with half its strings cut. And there he stays, all day, all night, all the next day. Some say the Qin believed this public display helped deter crime. Others suspect it was more about spectacle. After all, what's the point of a brutal regime if no one gets to admire the artwork? You wonder if he's still alive. You wonder if he still hears the wind. The wheel casts a long shadow across the camp like a sundial made of suffering. No one jokes for a while. Even the guards move quieter, like the air has thickened. Later that week, the wheel is taken down. Not ceremoniously, just unstrapped and wheeled away like a forgotten festival prop. The man gone. No one asks, no one wants to know. But the next morning, there's a message carved into the dirt near the rice pot. 3 words, still thinking clearly. No one claims it, but everyone reads it. And just like that, the tension shifts. A tiny, almost imperceptible rebellion in the air. Not big enough to matter, but enough to notice. One prisoner starts humming again. A different one this time. A melody you don't recognize, but it sticks in your head like a dream you almost had. You hum it later under your breath. Tiny rebellions. That night, your bunkmate tells you a story. Not a scary one for once. A tale from the old days before the unification of China. A woman who disguised herself as a man to join the army and fight for her father's honor. You smile. That sounds made up. He shrugs. Maybe. But made-up stories still get us through real nights. You decide to believe it anyway. But belief is a dangerous thing in this place. Because belief leads to hope. And hope, well, hope gets noticed. The guards are sniffing around more lately, asking about anyone acting unusually. What does that mean? Laughing too long. Smiling when no one else is looking at the moon like it still means something. You start learning how to dull your own expression. How to keep your mouth neutral. How to stare at the ground without appearing lost in thought. Thinking is a risky hobby. Still, the stories continue. Whispered under blankets, etched with fingernails into the bottoms of bowls. One prisoner writes poems in his rice with a chopstick. They vanish after every meal, but he doesn't stop. It's like watching a snowflake melt, then insisting on catching another. Then comes the branding. You see the iron in the fire before anyone explains what it's for. Long flat shaped like the character for criminal, or maybe traitor. Hard to tell. Chinese characters are versatile that way. One guard says it's for identification. Another says it's about shame. A third laughs and says it's just for fun. You're not sure which one is scarier. They line you up shoulder to shoulder, backs exposed. The fire glows hotter as the sun begins to set. Shadows flicker across stone walls like dancers preparing for a funeral. Then comes the hiss. Each press of the iron is quick but thorough. A second, maybe less. But the echo rings longer. The smell worse than pain. It's like burnt hair and singed meat and a kind of chemical sorrow. Some scream, others bite their lips, one faints. You grit your teeth and picture waterfalls. Afterward, you're handed a piece of cloth more ceremonial than useful to wipe the burn, as if a gesture could undo a scar. That night, the branded skin pulses like a second heartbeat, but you wake up. You're alive. You're still you. Mostly. Later, someone jokes, now we're all officially certified. It's not funny, but you laugh anyway, because it's either that or cry. That's the thing no one tells you about surviving brutality. Sometimes you laugh at the worst times. Sometimes you find beauty in nonsense. Sometimes you sing with a broken voice, because silence feels like giving up. And sometimes when no one's watching, you write your name in the dirt, just to remember you still exist. Tiny rebellions. You're starting to notice a rhythm in the camp, not a comforting rhythm like ocean waves or grandma's rocking chair. More like the faint, unsettling tick of a cracked clock, never quite steady, never entirely off. Morning drills, midday punishments, late-night silence, then repeat. But today something interrupts that uneasy flow. You're standing in line for the morning ladle of rice porridge, grey, watery, deeply unappetizing, yet somehow the best part of your day when a group of new prisoners is marched in. 20-30, all in chains, all filthy hollow-eyed. But what stands out isn't their number, it's their silence. Not the kind of silence that says, we've given up. This silence is different, heavy, calculated, like they've already seen the worst, and it's still clinging to them like soot. You catch a whisper death mirrors. It sends a chill down your spine even before you understand it. A veteran prisoner, a wiry man with a limp and a habit of whistling through his teeth, leans in close to explain. It's the copper box, he murmurs, like he's naming a ghost. They trap you inside it with sunlight bouncing off polished metal. No sleep, no shade, just heat. Reflections. You either go mad or confess to something, and now you can't unsee it. Far across the yard beyond the mess hall and behind a spiked fence sits a squat bronze chamber square, low and featureless, but for one single eye-slitted door. It gleams in the morning sun like it's been waxed by cruelty itself. The guards call it the Mirror Tomb. The Qin Empire, you learn, was obsessed with order, mathematical, bureaucratic, celestial. So it should come as no surprise that even their psychological torment was engineered with precision. The copper box was built not to wound, but to disorient. The interior, polished metal walls, ceiling, floor. A perfect echo chamber for both light and thought. They say prisoners trapped inside start seeing things, dancing lights, accusing faces, warped versions of themselves, whispering confessions they haven't yet made. Scholars still debate whether this was ever widespread policy under Emperor Qin Shi Huang. Some claim it was a local invention adopted by overzealous wardens. Others insist it was part of a larger experimentation with mental degradation, alongside sleep deprivation, sensory inversion, and forced hallucination. Either way, the new prisoners bear the mark: sun-scorched skin, darting eyes, twitching hands. One of them tries to shield his face from the sky, even though there's no light above. Another mutters numbers, possibly dates, possibly nonsense. A third just stands still, arms stiff like a mannequin mid-march. You hear he was inside for 6 days. 6, without food, with barely a sip of water. Just light bouncing and bouncing and bouncing until it stops being physics and becomes punishment. And get this, no restraints. They don't tie you up. You're free to move around the chamber. But there's nowhere to go. No up, no down. Just your own shape echoing back at you from every surface. 1,000 silent, warped versions of you, judging you, laughing at you, accusing you. Eventually one of them wins. You think, how bad can that really be? Then you see the aftermath. The guards have dragged one prisoner out by his wrists. He's alive. Sort of. His lips move like they're still talking to a reflection. His legs don't work quite right. He asks the guard if he's real. The guard laughs and says, "Not anymore. That night you lie on your side and close your eyes. But now when you dream, you see walls shiny, seamless, closing in. You wake up gasping, even though your cell has no mirrors, no copper, no lights at all. Funny how your brain does the torturing even when the guards clock out. Somewhere in the weeks that follow, the mirror box disappears. Just like that. Moved, dismantled. Who knows? But in its place, a new device appears, an upright wooden structure with two foot-shaped grooves and a hinged bar across the top. You recognize it from whispered lore, the jia, or wooden collar. But this version's different, bigger, custom-built. The collar alone must weigh 40 pounds, enough to make every step a negotiation with gravity. And once you're locked into it, chin up, neck stiff, you can't lie down, can't eat properly, can't even scratch your nose. And they leave you in it for hours, sometimes days. The trick isn't surviving the pain, it's surviving the humiliation. The guards walk by and laugh. Sometimes they draw on the collar with charcoal jokes, insults, caricatures. One woman ends up with a crude rabbit drawn above her forehead. Why a rabbit, no one knows, but it sticks. For weeks afterward, people whisper, "There goes the rabbit," and she doesn't flinch. Not once. They say she used to be a magistrate, high-ranking, respectable. The collar broke her body, but not her eyes. She still looks people straight on. Even the guards. Especially the guards. They hate that. Eventually, one of them tries to teach her a lesson. He loosens the collar just a little, pretends to be helpful, then slaps her hard enough to knock her off her feet, with the collar still on. The fool does what the torture couldn't, it snaps her arm. The guard laughs, of course, but she still doesn't cry out. That's the part that really burns them. Later, another prisoner slips her a bit of cloth folded, clean a scrap from someone's old shirt. She uses it as a makeshift sling. When the collar finally comes off, she walks away like it was just another day. You wonder what she dreams about at night, if she even sleeps at all. There's a guard named Bao who starts coming around more often after that. He's younger than most, eager to prove something. The worst kind, really. Smiles too much. Wears his uniform too tight, like he wants it to squeeze the cruelty in. Bao introduces a new twist to the collar routine. He straps it to a tall wooden beam, forces prisoners to wear it, and be suspended upright, heels barely brushing the ground. They call it the dangling. Less flashy than the wheel, quieter than the box, but maybe worse in its own way. You're always just one breath away from falling asleep and snapping your spine, and yet somehow you keep breathing. You start keeping count of your breaths, like steps in a tunnel. 1, 2, 300, 4,000. You lose count around 5,000 and start again. This becomes a secret game in the camp. Not chess, not cards, just breath counting. The record 17,233, held by a man with a lazy eye and a lisp who said each breath was a prayer to whatever God wasn't watching. The guards never catch on. They think you're meditating. Somewhere deep down, you know this isn't sustainable. But it helps, even if only to give you the illusion of control. And in here, illusion is currency. One night during a rainstorm so heavy it rattles the roof tiles loose. You sneak out only a few paces from the wall, just to feel the water. Real rain. Cold, wild, not regulated by any warden or officer. You open your mouth to catch it. Someone nearby does the same. You don't speak. You just share the sky for a moment. The next morning, Bao has you digging ditches in the mud. A punishment, maybe. But your arms are too sore to care. The earth feels real beneath your fingers. Then he hands you a shovel made of bronze. The irony hits you hard. Bronze. The same metal used for the mirror tomb. Now you're digging with the same material they used to torment you. History's got jokes. Later, someone sneaks a poem into your sleeve. It's scratched on bamboo bark. Just 3 lines. Copper shows no soul. Shadows dance on bent collar. Rain knows no empire. You don't know who wrote it, but you memorize it anyway. Tiny rebellions. They can't be branded out. They can't be boxed. They can't be broken, not fully, not yet. You wake up to coughing, not yours, not even from your block. It's farther off, hoarse, repetitive, like someone trying to clear cement from their lungs. You sit up on your straw mat, which crackles beneath you like it's made of dry leaves, and tilt your head to listen. The air feels off, heavier than usual, tainted. By midday, the smell confirms it's smoke. Thick, oily, unnatural. Not cooking fires, not incense offerings. This is the kind of smoke that suggests someone's burning things they shouldn't. Hair, cloth, maybe worse. You're herded to the edge of the training yard, where a platform has been erected overnight. It's not particularly tall, but it's wide. Wide enough for several prisoners to stand shoulder to shoulder, arms bound behind them with leather cords stained dark from years of use. And that smell, it's stronger here. bitter metallic. The guards call this ritual red recompense. Sounds poetic, right? What it means in practice is this public branding. One by one, prisoners are dragged forward. Their crime is shouted aloud: stealing grain, insubordination, hoarding salt, and then the punishment is applied. A red-hot iron shaped like the character for Criminal Q pressed onto the forehead shoulder, or sometimes, if the crime was truly unforgivable, right over the heart. You notice something odd as the first brand is applied. The prisoner doesn't scream. His eyes clench, his knees buckle, but not a sound escapes his lips. Neither do the ones who follow. Not even when the iron sizzles against flesh loud enough for birds to scatter. That's when you realize they've all stuffed bits of cloth in their mouths. Not to muffle the scream, but to keep from giving the guards the satisfaction. The iron, you notice, isn't held over fire. It's placed in a bed of glowing black stones, charcoal, and something else. Maybe saltpeter historians still argue what combination the Qin used to keep the heat long and lethal. And there's another twist. Each branding is recorded, literally. A scribe sits nearby with bamboo slips and ink, noting the date, the prisoner's name, and the exact placement of the mark. It's bureaucracy meets brutality. A physical and written record in case the scar isn't proof enough. But that's not even the worst part. Some prisoners aren't just branded. They're tattooed with permanent ink made from crushed minerals, blood, and allegedly boiled snake venom for longevity. The marks are phrases: enemy of the state one who lies, or just a single black square over the cheekbone. You're told the black square marks someone who tried to escape. The story as it started with one man who made it 50 miles before capture. Now every escapee is square branded in his honor. Guess what his nickname was? The Wall. Not exactly poetic anymore. There's a running joke in camp. If you're not inked, you're not interesting. You start to notice how true it is. The guards ignore the unmarked. They know the branded ones break easier, or rebel harder. One night someone sneaks you a shard of polished bone. It's small, barely larger than a thumb, but it reflects just enough light for you to see the side of your own face. You stare, waiting. No brand yet, not today anyway. You slide the bone back under your mat like a secret. Next week there's a new round of branding, but this time it's different. No fire, no irons, just something called the ink needle. The guards say it's from a foreign land to the west, adapted by Qin interrogators. You hear whispers: a long needle dipped in dye tapped into the skin with tiny wooden hammers. It doesn't burn, but it lasts, and it hurts in a different way. You're assigned to cleaning duty that day, so you're given the job of scrubbing the floor after the ritual. The stone is stained blue-black in places, not red this time. The blood's already mixed with pigment, the fringe detail. Apparently these tattooing methods evolved into decorative art centuries later. What starts here as punishment will one day be fashion. Funny how culture works. You sit by a rain barrel that evening, rinsing your hands, watching the water swirl dark. Then you hear the footsteps, fast, urgent. 3 guards dragging in a man who clearly didn't go quietly. His face is bruised, his robes torn, but he's standing. Defiant. Dangerous. The guards don't throw him in a cell. They strap him to something else entirely, a kind of wooden frame angled forward like a dentist's chair from the underworld. Arms secured, legs clamped. You know this setup. You've only heard of it in whispers: the tendon flayer. Not as showy as branding, much quieter, but far more effective. A dull bronze blade shaped like a flattened spoon is used to press, not slice, against the arms and thighs. The goal isn't to cut, it's to separate layers of tissue slowly, painfully, deliberately, like peeling a fruit you hate. The guards don't rush, they take turns. This man is important. You hear one say he was a minor noble, someone who refused to send his eldest son to conscription. Treason under Qin law. They want a confession. They always want a confession. What's chilling isn't the pain. It's that they keep repeating the same question. Who else knew? Who else knew? Who else knew? You count 18 times. The noble doesn't answer. They stop eventually. Not because he breaks, but because his body does. They unstrap him and carry him to the infirmary, or the pit, or maybe just away. You never find out. That night, you can't stop thinking about that phrase. Who else knew? As if knowledge itself is a crime, and in a way, under the Qin, it is. The empire famously burned books, buried scholars, and erased histories. If a person can hold dangerous knowledge, then surely the body itself becomes evidence. Maybe that's why they mark it. Twist it, punish it. Turn skin into confession. Your friend, the one with the lazy eye, tells you about a rumoured method used deep in the Western provinces cricket pressing. Sounds ridiculous, right? Turns out it's not. Prisoners are trapped inside stone boxes with live crickets, thousands of them. It's not about pain, it's about noise. The constant grating chirps wear down the mind, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days. He swears it's real. Historians laugh it off. But honestly, after what you've seen, nothing surprises you. The camp's mood shifts again. It always does. Like a living thing, it breathes, contracts, relaxes, convulses. Some weeks are heavy on work, others heavy on punishment. This week, it's all about silence. Every prisoner is required to remain completely mute from dawn till dusk. No talking, no humming, no coughing if you can help it. If you make a sound, the guards drag you to the wall of echoes. That's what the prisoners call it. It's a smooth limestone surface in the southern yard, shaped into a perfect concave. Whisper into it and the sound rebounds multiplied. You're strapped facing the wall, forced to repeat the same phrase over and over until your voice is hoarse. The phrase, "I am the cause of disorder," over and over, echoes upon echoes. It's not loud, but it's maddening. By the 5th hour, one prisoner starts reciting different lines from memory poems, mantras, insults, anything to drown himself out. They gag him. He doesn't come back for 3 days. When he does, his voice is gone. That night, you mouth the phrase silently, just to feel it in your throat. I'm the cause of disorder. Isn't that the point of all this? To make you agree. To make you believe it, even when it isn't true, especially then. You sit in your cell watching the moonlight creep across the floor and think about all the words you're not allowed to say, all the names you're not allowed to remember. And somehow, those unsaid things grow louder than anything the wall can echo. You wake to the unmistakable scrape of chains, but these aren't the ones you know. These are heavier, more deliberate. Think symphony of rust with a backbeat of doom. You sit up, barely spine creaking, like the gate at the north wall, and peek through the bars. It's transfer day. That's the polite version. The guards call it the shift. Every few weeks, prisoners are marched out, some for labour, some for exile, and a few for experiments. You've learned not to ask which group you're in until the shackles close. Your feet find the dirt-bare soles aching from yesterday's wall scrubbing, and you shuffle forward with the others. Today, your destination isn't the quarry or the archives, or even the punishment yard. It's worse. It's the shaping house, and yeah, it sounds like a trendy acupuncture clinic. It's not. You've only heard whispers. Some say it's a secret building used to reshape prisoners who've failed to conform. Others say it's where they test the boundaries of pain and control without shedding blood. Turns out both rumours are correct. Inside, the air is thick with vinegar, and herbs an odd combo that makes your eyes water before the real tears start. The room itself is stone windowless, cold enough to make your breath fog, and dotted with stone slabs, outfitted with clamps, cords, and bizarre wooden contraptions that look like they were designed by a sleep-deprived puppeteer. This is where you learn about the frame. It's a simple-looking wooden rack that tilts like a hammock made from bad ideas. Once you're strapped in ankles, wrists, waist, they begin to stretch you. Not break your bones, not even dislocate technically. It's more insidious than that. They're training your body to forget its natural shape. Over hours, sometimes days, joints are elongated just enough to weaken the muscles around them. The effect, you walk slower, think slower. Eventually, you forget what upright feels like. It's the physical equivalent of making someone speak in riddles until they forget their native tongue. You're lucky. You're only left in the frame for 2 hours. The guy next to you, they forget him overnight. The next day, he has to relearn how to hold a bowl without shaking. Historians still argue whether the shaping house was a sanctioned tool or the pet project of a few creative torturers. No imperial records mention it by name, but some scholars claim to have found clay models in nearby tombs, figures bent at unnatural angles, possibly memorials of those who never quite reshaped back. But today's true horror show, the cloak of teeth, you don't believe it at first. Sounds made up, like something a particularly creative kid dreams up during ghost story night. But there it is, a thick, stiff vest lined on the inside with dozens, no hundreds of animal teeth. Mostly canine, some human. All filed sharp and polished, like pearls of malice. When worn, The cloak presses inward. Not deeply. Just enough that every breath is a choice between stillness and stabbing. The guards strap one onto a prisoner who's been talking back. They tighten it like armor. His eyes bulge before he even moves. A half step sends the teeth digging in. He freezes, shudders, and stays still for 12 hours. That's the genius of it. The pain isn't constant. It's dormant, waiting. You imagine walking a mile in that thing. You'd be shredded. There's debate among historians over whether the cloak was real or symbolic, a metaphor for the suffocating weight of state loyalty. Fringe theory. One historian suggests it might have doubled as an execution method the victim left immobile until wild dogs tore the cloak off. It's a bit theatrical, but after 10 weeks here, you don't rule anything out. That night, you dream of your own ribcage tightening. You wake up gasping hands against your chest, half convinced something's growing inside you. You stare at the ceiling and remind yourself breathe, slowly. But you've picked up a new tic. You flinch whenever someone touches your shoulders, even gently. You think it'll pass. Spoiler, it won't. The next morning, a new term drifts through the camp like smoke sky pillars. Sounds poetic, right? Like some ancient monument. It's not. It's a punishment for status defiance prisoners who refuse to bow, avert their eyes, or address officials with the correct titles. You saw a guy refuse to say, "My humble self," last week. You thought it was a joke. Now you're not laughing. Sky pillars are a set of thin wooden poles inserted vertically into holes in the ground. They're roughly chest high. The prisoner is suspended horizontally across the tops of the pole's arms and legs, tied to two of them, stomach exposed with nothing beneath to support the back. Imagine a hammock made of toothpicks, and your spine is the thing sagging between them. At first it's manageable, but hour by hour gravity becomes the torturer. The chest sinks, breathing turns shallow, muscles spasm, and there's no way to relieve the pressure without dislocating something. You count 4 prisoners on the pillars by midday. 2 are pulled off conscious. The other 2, well, you never see them again. The guards call it rebalancing. You call it spine origami. A week later, something unexpected happens. You're moved, not to another punishment cell, not even to labor. You're taken to a room lined with scrolls. They say it's the documentation wing. Apparently even torture needs record keeping. You're handed a brush and inkstone and a pile of slips. Your job, transcribe punishment logs. Name, date, method, duration, outcome. You write the same phrase 20 times. Interrogation unsuccessful. Subject expired. That night, the irony hits you they're using you a prisoner to record the fates of other prisoners. And not just any prisoners. Some of them were your neighbors. One shared a water bowl with you last week. Another once smuggled you a sweetened rice kernel. Now they're a line on bamboo. But something strange happens in the transcription room. You find a slip that wasn't supposed to be there. It's old. Faded. The ink almost erased by time and sweat. But the characters are clear enough. Punishment mirror maze. You've never heard of that one. You ask one of the other scribes. He looks at you pale. They only built one, he whispers. A building filled with polished bronze panels arranged in a way that disorients the prisoner. The floor shifts. The air smells of metal and mildew. Inside, it's not the pain that drives people mad. It's seeing yourself. Over and over. Distorted. Bleeding. Crawling. Screaming. Echoes from every direction. No one knows where the mirror maze is now. Some say it was torn down after one of the interrogators went in and didn't come out. Others say it's still standing in the hills. Empty. Waiting. You try not to think about it. But that night, every time you blink, you see your own reflection distorted, twitching behind your eyelids. You rinse your face in the morning and swear the water moves away from your hands. The mind plays tricks here, or maybe the place does. Either way, you're different now. Not broken, but bent. And in the Qin Dynasty, that's enough to keep you useful. The scroll room has its perks. You're indoors. You sit. The ink fumes are pungent, sure, but better than the vinegar-vapored dread chambers downstairs. And for a while, just a little while, you allow yourself to pretend this is a kind of promotion. That's always when they get you. A guard arrives with a slip that simply reads, 1 for the drum. You don't get a say. You're not even sure what that means until you're led out to the central courtyard. And there it is, waiting under a pale silk tarp flapping in the breeze. It's a drum, but not a musical one. This is the resonant body drum, a horrifying little invention designed supposedly for message amplification, which is a poetic way of saying someone's going to scream into it, and you're going to feel every note. The contraption is massive. Imagine a hollow circular frame stretched tight across with taut animal hide. But instead of being struck with sticks, prisoners are laid across its surface back to the hide limbs, spread wide like grotesque starfish. Then the real instrument begins. Wooden mallets padded with raw silk and bone chips are struck against the hide from beneath. The vibrations ripple through the stretched skin and right into your spine. You're told it was once used to carry confessions from uncooperative scholars. The thinking was, if you make the body the instrument, the truth will eventually play itself. You last about 20 minutes. The first few strikes aren't even painful, just jarring. Your teeth clack. Your eardrums buzz like startled cicadas. But then your muscles start trembling. Something under your ribcage begins to hum. Your bladder threatens betrayal. And then the real terror begins. Involuntary speech. It's not what you expect. You don't confess. You don't cry for mercy. You just start babbling. Fragments of dreams. Nonsense rhymes. Your grandmother's dumpling recipe. Anything to fill the vacuum left behind by your own willpower slowly eroding. Historians still argue whether the resonant body drum was truly used as a confession tool or simply a ceremonial punishment designed for spectacle. One fringe account claims the instrument was so finely tuned it could produce harmonic tones from the victim's spine. You didn't feel particularly musical, but the guard said you had a pleasant pitch. So there's that. The next day, you're back in the documentation wing, but your hands won't stop trembling. Not from trauma necessarily, but from resonance. You swear your bones are still humming. One of the other scribes nods. 3 days, he whispers. That's how long it echoes. You don't ask if he's guessing or remembering. Later that week, your ankle is shackled again. New method, new test group. This one's called the stone step ritual. You're led outside finally. For a moment, you even enjoy the sun. But the ground here is tiled with small, uneven stone slabs, some barely the width of your foot, each separated by a finger's width of space. It looks like an innocent garden path. It's not. You're barefoot. The rules are simple across the stones. But here's the twist. Each prisoner carries a bucket filled with river stones in one hand and hot embers in the other. You can't drop either. If you stumble and spill, the embers burned. If you drop the stones, beaten. If you finish the path without hesitation, they make you go again, only this time blindfolded. You get 5 steps before your foot catches on a raised slab. Embers lick your sleeve. The guard sighs dramatically. Clumsy scholars get extra laps, he says. You nearly throw the bucket at him, but you don't, because you remember what comes after disobedience. The ritual isn't designed for punishment exactly. It's for humbling. This was allegedly part of the Qin philosophy, break the ego by requiring delicate obedience, not just pain endurance. It said Emperor Qin Shi Huang favored this method for punishing failed ministers, especially those who thought too highly of their intellect. Historians still debate if this ritual was ever truly policy, or if it was the invention of local wardens hoping to curry favor with central officials. Either way, your toes will never forgive you, nor will your dignity. But even pain becomes routine, and so they escalate. They always do. You're told the next phase is voluntary. You laugh, that's the joke. They call it the riddle room. You're placed inside a sealed chamber with 10 stone tiles, each engraved with a character. On the wall is a puzzle, a simple verse in ancient script with a single blank. You must step on the tile that fills the blank. If you choose wrong, the floor tilts and you fall maybe 6 feet onto a bed of smooth round stones. It doesn't break bones, just bruises pride and hips, and then they haul you back up and you try again. What's cruel is how often the right answer still gets punished. Because this isn't about solving riddles, it's about hesitation. Every pause is considered untrustworthy thinking. The system's logic is terrifying in its simplicity. If you hesitate, you doubt the emperor's wisdom. If you're confident and wrong, you're arrogant. Only perfect instant obedience is safe. You try the character for harmony, wrong. You try silence, wrong again. You choose emptiness and fall face first into the pit for the 3rd time. Eventually, someone whispers the real answer isn't on the floor, it's to bow and refuse to step. The guards call that submission without self. You're allowed to leave then. Historians still puzzle over records of these rooms. Some argue they were metaphorical, used in parables. Others swear remnants of similar testing chambers have been uncovered under certain Qin temples. Either way, your knees ache for days. When your bruises fade, you're offered a gift, a transfer to the kitchens. It feels like mercy. It's not. The kitchen isn't for cooking. It's for the salt trials. A series of experiments designed around sensory control and deprivation. You're fed heavily salted rice for 3 days. No water. Then suddenly they give you sweetened broth. Then nothing but pickled radish. Then water so cold it makes your teeth scream. You're not being punished now. You're being studied, because apparently even your taste buds can betray the empire. Rumor has it the salt trials were designed to test loyalty through restraint. If you begged for relief, you were weak. If you refused to eat, you were rebellious. If you enjoyed the bitter flavors, you were suspected of sadistic tendencies. One record speaks of a court official who passed the entire trial without expression. He was promoted, then executed. Scholars still question whether the salt trials were part of a larger sensory manipulation strategy, maybe even early psychological warfare. All you know is that you can't taste anything but salt for weeks. Even when you dream everything's brined, it's almost a relief when the fire drills start. No, not those fire drills. These involve standing barefoot on heated tiles until you pass out. But that's a story for tomorrow. Tonight you curl up against the stone floor, licking condensation from the wall. You hum to yourself just a little, and somewhere in your bones the drum answers. You wake with your tongue stuck to the inside of your mouth. Your dreams were filled with flame chased by walls of heat stumbling through cracked courtyards. You open your eyes to find it wasn't just a dream. They've heated the floor again. A crimson glow bleeds between the stone tiles under your feet, faint but unmistakable. You pull back instinctively, but there's nowhere cool to hide, just gradations of warmer scorching. Welcome to the fire tiles. You're told this began as a test of endurance for the Emperor's personal guards, those whose loyalty needed to match their pain tolerance. Of course, once they saw the potential, it was shared with certain prisons, especially for people who overthought orders. Like you. Today's task is simple: stand still for the duration of a song. Not sung, of course, beaten out slowly on a bronze bell. Each tone lingers like smoke, marking the slow seconds as your souls begin to protest. At first it's just uncomfortable, then sharp. Then you feel the skin beginning to bubble like thin dough on a hot griddle. You shift your weight. A guard taps his rod on the bars, no fidgeting. So you breathe, in through your nose, out through clenched teeth. You wonder briefly how long a song lasts in a dynasty where they burned books but kept flutes. 5 minutes? 7. You make it to the third bell tone before your legs start twitching. You're not alone. Around you, other prisoners sway like wind-struck reeds. Some faint. One collapses and they drag him off not to a medic, but to start again tomorrow. Quirky records from the time suggest the fire tiles were sometimes seasoned with salt or vinegar between sessions to extract weakness from the feet, as one scroll bizarrely phrases it. Most historians roll their eyes, but some suspect the salt was just to make the burns sting more the next day. You complete the set, barely. They let you step off, but only onto cold water. Not to soothe you, just to watch the steam rise. Looks like you cooked right through the warden jokes. You don't laugh. You're starting to forget how. Later that night, your cellmate tells you about the ink cage. And by morning, you're inside it. It's not what it sounds like. There are no birds, no feathers, no chirping scroll keepers. Just a small bamboo cell suspended above a vat of black ink. You can't sit. You can't lie down. You can only squat barely. They give you a brush. You're a scribe, they say. Let's see your loyalty. Every hour you must write a praise sentence about the Emperor. If you don't, the cage is lowered just a touch. By hour 10, your thighs are trembling. By hour 15, the ink fumes sting your eyes. By hour 20, you've used the same phrase 37 times. The Son of Heaven is endless, like the river. And yes, you're aware of the irony. The cage is sometimes used for those who recanted confessions, especially scholars who resisted writing propaganda. The belief was that pain could force truth, but repetition could instill belief. It doesn't. But it's good at hollowing you out. Some odd footnote claims the emperor himself once visited a facility where an ink cage prisoner had written a poem so moving it was carved into palace stone. The next line in the record: he was then mercifully drowned in his own ink. No one knows if it's a metaphor. Maybe it's better not to. After 24 hours they pull you out. Your hands are black. Your nails blue. The ink is under your skin now. Your joints stiff with more than fear. You try to wipe your eyes, but just smear yourself darker. You're unrecognizable. And they seem to like that. You're no longer a person, you're a blot. You think you're finally done. But the next day, they call your number again. You don't ask why. This time it's the echo well. A narrow shaft sunk deep into the prison floor, just wide enough for a man to stand inside, arms pressed tight to his sides. It's said to be 30 feet deep with perfect acoustics. They lower you in. Not to isolate you, to echo you. You're told to recite your crime, over and over. The walls throw your words back at you, warped and twisted, rising and falling like ghosts. And if you stop, the rope is pulled up just enough to make you tiptoe. You begin. I withheld grain reports. Again. I withheld grain reports. Again. Again. Eventually, it doesn't sound like your voice anymore. It sounds like someone drowning in their own breath. The well was supposedly designed by Qin engineers obsessed with acoustics, meant to break the mind through auditory reflection. A few historians question whether the actual well existed or if it was a metaphor for bureaucratic repetition, where one mistake echoed endlessly through ranks. You believe it's both. They leave you in for a day and a night. You emerge broken but quiet, and that's all they ever wanted. You think this is the end, but then you hear the name whispered in the hallway. The copper box. It's the last stage, they say. Only used on the truly incorrigible. You laugh quietly because you've forgotten what incorrigible even means. The box arrives in the courtyard. It looks like a treasure chest. Ornate engraved, regal almost. Then the lid opens. Inside is lined with mirrored bronze. No padding. No corners. Just sharp angles and polished heat. You're told to climb in. You hesitate. Ah, says the warden. Still some thought left in you. You enter. The lid shuts. You're alone with yourself. But not just yourself. Every movement bounces back. Every breath ricochets. The mirrored bronze traps your face 100-fold. You are surrounded by you. Multiplied. Distorted. Inescapable. And then they begin to heat the metal. Slowly. Not enough to burn, just enough to raise the temperature. You sweat. Then bake. Then bake some more. Your mind doesn't know where to focus. Your thoughts are everywhere and nowhere. Your eyes see too much. Your nose tastes copper. The box was once rumoured to be used only on royal dissenters, men who spoke too sharply in court or penned satire in verse. Historians still argue whether it was designed for pain or reflection, whether it was meant to torture the body or shame the soul. You believe it's both. They open the box after what might have been an hour or a lifetime. You're pulled out, you collapse. They say nothing, because nothing needs saying. You've been rendered quiet, still, obedient. And that is the true aim of Qin justice, not just punishment, but harmony. A harmony achieved by silencing every dissonant note. Even your heartbeat feels quieter now. And somewhere deep in the prison's guts, the resonant drum hums again. A low, familiar note. It's not music, it's memory. There's no calendar on the wall. No rising sun to count the days. Just one long, unbroken night, stretching from corridor to corridor. You've stopped asking how long it's been since your arrival, or since your last name was spoken. You only remember the sounds, the creak of gates, the hiss of steam, the slow grinding of stone against stone. Tonight that sound is back. Stone moving. The floor under your cell rumbles faintly like a whisper beneath your feet. You sit up. Chains rattle elsewhere. Even the rats seem nervous. A moment later the guard appears. You already know what he'll say. Get up. You've been selected. Selected. It always sounds so polite, like a prize. Like maybe you'll be handed a fruit basket and a pardon. You chuckle under your breath, which earns you a cuff to the ribs. Apparently, humour's above your pay grade tonight. You follow him, left, then down again, and then down again. The deeper levels are colder. Not just in temperature, but in energy. like you've crossed some line where human things hope mercy memory aren't welcome anymore. At the base of this spiral is a new chamber, new to you at least. They call it the Blood Gate. The irony, there's almost no blood involved. Not anymore. This was once a physical gate, historians believe an actual passage you had to squeeze through after confession. But the punishment that evolved from it was more psychological, a ritual of submission. You're stripped down and placed in a narrow channel, barely shoulder width, barely knee height. The stone walls are slick, the floor uneven. Your job, crawl. Crawl through the entire passage, about 30 meters they say, without stopping, without speaking, without raising your head. You must make yourself small, literally and metaphorically. The idea humility through compression. As you move, the air changes, colder, then warmer, then somehow sweet. A cloying smell lingers halfway through. Some say it's incense. Others believe it's from ancient offerings poured centuries ago that have seeped into the stone. Whatever it is, it makes your head spin. Somewhere above the guards chant. You can't hear the words, but the rhythm is enough to make your heartbeat sink. And then you reach the middle. This is the test. A narrow slot, barely larger than a face carved into the side of the tunnel. You're supposed to confess here. Not aloud, not to a scribe, to the stone itself. A whisper, a breath, one sentence only. You hesitate. Not because you're unsure what to say, but because you don't know if your words still mean anything. Eventually you say, I wanted too much. The walls don't respond, no divine reply. Just silence and mildew. You move forward, dragging your knees on centuries of worn-down stone. At the far end, 2 guards pull you out. Your skin is scraped, your spirit more so. But you've passed, kind of. At least that's what they tell you. And that's when they take you to the Lantern Court. Now this is something else. A courtyard open to the night lit by a ring of gently glowing lanterns. It almost feels serene. You relax, too soon. At the center of the courtyard is a strange contraption, half sculpture, half shrine. It looks like a tree made of twisted bronze rods. Hanging from each branch is a lantern. Inside the lanterns, words, tiny scrolls suspended in oil. You're told to choose one. Just one. You're not told what they say. And here's the catch. Whichever one you choose determines your next punishment. Not randomly. No. The scrolls contain actual judgments written by scribes, long dead. You won't read it, they will. And then based on its content, your fate is sealed. You pick one with a blue tassel. The guard opens it. He doesn't smile, doesn't frown, just nods. Silken restraint, he says. And you think that doesn't sound so bad. You're wrong, of course. They take you inside. They bind you, not with rope or chains, but with long strips of dyed silk. Red, green, indigo. Each strip is wrapped with ritual care, forming tight spirals around your limbs, torso, and even neck. Not to choke, but to restrict. You are perfectly bound, like a ceremonial gift. Then you're laid in the center of a warm chamber, incense smoldering nearby and left there. No pain, no voices, no movement, just silence. And time. You can't even scratch your nose. This was reportedly used on high-ranking scholars accused of disloyal thought. The silk symbolized beauty and civilization, mocking the prisoner with the very values they supposedly betrayed. Some historians claim that certain prisoners spent days this way, fed by straw and spoken to only in poetry. One tale even claims a man begged to be executed rather than celebrated again. That's bureaucracy for you, where death is less feared than paperwork. Eventually you're unwrapped. Your muscles scream, but the real pain is mental. You've been made a symbol, both honored and humiliated, all while smelling faintly of hibiscus. Back in your cell, the days blur. You sleep a little, eat less, drift in and out of memories. But then it comes. The summons. Only 2 words, Bellteeth. You laugh. Again. You're making a habit of that. Then you see it. A small chamber. One wall lined with actual bells. Each one slightly different in tone shape and weight size. They're not made for music. They're made for mouths. You sit. A scribe enters. He hands you a wax tablet and asks you to confess again. But not just the usual crime. They want motivation, intention, the stuff that stains deepest. If you refuse, They fit one of the bells over your jaw. Inside the bell are sharp prongs, not to pierce, just to press. Hard. If you lie, they strike the bell lightly. The vibration travels through your teeth, your jaw, your skull. It doesn't hurt exactly, but it makes your thoughts unravel. This practice supposedly originated with metallurgists who believed sound could reveal weakness if it works on bronze. Why not the brain? Fringe theory, yes. Effective, also yes. You speak. Eventually, not out of fear, but to stop the ringing in your bones. You say what they want, or close enough. They record it, quietly. And once again, you return to your cell. Smaller, lighter, like a sheet of rice paper that's been folded too many times. The final straw comes the next morning. You're taken half-conscious to a narrow stairwell. No guards, just one lantern. At the top is the Boeing Bridge. It's not actually a bridge, more like a narrow beam stretched across a pit. But the rule is simple. You must cross it on your knees. One step at a time. Head down. Each plank has a different name carved into it. Traitors, rebels, liars, thieves. And as you cross, you must say one name for every movement forward. The idea, you walk across the sins of others to cleanse your own. Halfway through, you stop. Your knees are raw, your voice hoarse, but you've made it this far. And whether or not your name is carved into the last plank you're too tired to care, you finish and collapse. Above you, the sky is starting to lighten, a rare thing in this place. And just before you're dragged back inside, you feel it. Not redemption, not relief, just air. Real, honest, unscented, unsupervised air. And in this place, that might be the greatest mercy of all. The light doesn't last long. That brief breath of open air, that flicker of pale sky. It vanishes like a dream sucked into the stone corridors behind you. You're back underground, before your lungs even remember how to expand fully. Your knees scream with each step. The skin is raw, the joints thick with ache, and there's a strange rubbery wobble to your stride now. But there's no time for recovery, because now you meet the Echo Warden. They say this man has never spoken above a whisper, that he once memorized every scream ever recorded within the prison's ledger, by tone, by pitch, by category. Is that true? Historians still argue whether he was a real person or a rotating role passed among elite interrogators. All you know is when he arrives, the hallway goes quiet, and your guards so tough, so smug suddenly look at their boots. The Echo Warden doesn't touch you, doesn't shout. He just places a small ceramic bowl on the ground and taps it once with a slender reed. The sound rings out pure high unnatural. Then he listens. You don't hear anything, but he does. He tilts his head, eyes half-lidded, as if interpreting some whispered riddle only he can hear. He nods, taps again. Each sound is different. Each vibration supposedly calibrated to detect the shape of your guilt, like echolocation for the soul. Ridiculous, absolutely. Terrifying, also yes. You're made to sit in front of a series of these bowls. The process is repeated. Tap, pause, listen, tap, tilt, whisper. Eventually he gives a tiny nod, then says in the faintest voice, suitable for veil reading, you blink. Oh good, a promotion. They take you to a small room lit only by candlelight and fit you with a thin, translucent cloth over your head. Kind of like a wedding veil, but significantly less festive. The cloth is embedded with delicate inks patterns that shift under light. And as it drops over your face, something weird happens. You start to see shadows. Not cast by candles, not the guards, not even your own, but things, images, reflections of choices you've made. Or that's the theory. This was a form of optical interrogation practiced on high-value prisoners, where belief in the supernatural was leveraged to force confessions. You see vague forms in the veil: a coin, a broken bowl, a mouth with no tongue. They don't ask you what they mean. They just watch you react to them. It's like a guilt Rorschach test, but in silk. And in your case, the response must have been interesting, because they take you next to the Chamber of Hollow Records. Here things start to get even more surreal. You're placed in a cube-shaped room, walls covered in shelves, but there are no books, no scrolls, only bamboo slats. Dozens of them, each painted with a single name. Some slats are thick, some slim, some perfectly smooth, others cracked. Each represents a prisoner. Each is filed according to the weight of their confession. The trick is you're made to choose 3, and whichever 3 you choose will determine how your own testimony is recorded. But how do you choose? You don't know these people. The guards don't help. They just say, trust the silence. Another joke maybe, or maybe not. You pick 3. One is chipped. One has a faint smell of ink. One is strangely warm. They nod. They write. Some scholars believe this method was part of a psychological ritual to transfer guilt, to make the prisoner feel as though they were curating their own punishment. Others think it was just random busy work designed to induce paranoia. Either way it works. You feel off balance. Like you've written a story with no idea how it ends. That night you aren't returned to your cell. Instead, you're placed in a sleep box, a narrow coffin-sized crate padded with straw and lined with painted stars. Yes, stars. Apparently, this was some kind of recalibration treatment. The belief being that after enough disorientation, a man needs the illusion of the cosmos to recenter himself. You lie there, eyes to the fake sky, wondering how many others have stared at this same cluster of blue dots and thought, maybe I deserve this. And then you sleep, or something like it. It's hard to tell if what you experience is dreaming or a hallucination from whatever herbs were smouldering near the box. You see a face your own but older, a hand holding a broken seal, a voice whispering, you didn't kneel far enough. When you're pulled from the sleep box the next day, you're sore in places that should have recovered by now. You've stopped asking questions, but then you're taken somewhere you've only heard rumors about. The Hall of Unspoken Crimes. It's quiet here, even quieter than the Veil Room. No guards speak, no chains rattle. Instead, you're guided to a stone chair in front of a wall of faint reddish carvings. You can't make out what they say, not clearly, but you know they're not recent. The scribe sits beside you, stylus in hand, and then asks, what haven't you told us? Not what you did, not what you meant, but what you chose not to mention. This is where things get weird, because the expectation isn't that you lie, it's that you get creative. You're encouraged by silence, by pressure to invent a crime so deeply buried, so emotionally strange that it must somehow be true. Fringe researchers believe this technique was based on the principle of phantom confession, the idea that guilt would surface even in fictional scenarios and thus produce real catharsis. It's psychological confession turned performance art. So you play along. You describe how once as a boy you stole a black pebble from the emperor's garden. You kept it in your shoe for a year. You don't know why, but when you finally threw it into the river, you felt like you'd buried a piece of yourself. The scribe nods. He carves a single new symbol into the reddish wall. You don't know what it means, but now it's yours, forever. You're returned to your cell, and for the first time in weeks, maybe months, there's no assignment the next morning. No summons, no corridor, no chamber, just silence, which is somehow worse. You wonder, has your journey ended, or are they simply reloading the script? You count the cracks in the ceiling. You hum a tune that may or may not be real, and eventually sleep comes again. But lighter this time, more cautious, because you know the worst is still ahead. Somewhere beyond the walls, beneath the bells, behind the masks. The final trials, the final layers of who you used to be, and maybe if you're lucky, what's left of you after it all. When they return for you, there's no clanging, no footsteps echoing down the corridor, just a small bell, soft and high like wind over glass, tinkling somewhere near your door. That means one thing. The writ of shadowing has been issued. This is the final tier before judgment, and you're not supposed to know that. But you do, because of the whispers, because of the way the guards look away, and because no one ever comes back from this particular pathway with the same eyes. They lead you barefoot through winding halls that slope downwards subtly at first, and then sharply. Your ears pop. The air cools. Eventually, you reach the red lacquer gate, not red with paint, but stained by the hands that have pressed against it for generations. On the other side it begins. You're not alone anymore. 4 others sit in the dim room with you, each separated by long bamboo dividers carved with wave-like patterns. You can't see them, but you can hear every breath. This is called the mirror cell. You're all given the same prompt. If you were your judge, how would you break yourself? And then silence. You're expected to answer, not with logic, not with defense, but with imagination. And worse, you're punished for sounding too convincing. It's a trap, obviously. Historians still argue whether this room was ever actually used in the main capital prison, or if it was a border technique brought in from Western Chu prisoners. The bamboo etchings suggest a design rooted in symbolic drowning, each answer intended to pull you under. You speak anyway. I'd take away my name, you whisper, then let me live free, just not as myself. From across the divider, someone laughs. A dry chuckle, more like a cough. A moment later, you hear a choked cry from the far right. Another prisoner has cracked. You don't know what they said, but the silence afterward is heavy. A bell rings. That means you're released from the mirror cell. But the guards look even grimmer now, and they take you to the pit of restraint next. This one's famous even outside the Qin Empire. Picture a dry well maybe 20 feet across, ringed with vines, except the vines are made of leather restraints. You're suspended in the center upright, locked in place. Arms held out to the sides, legs bound but not tight. You don't hang. You hover. And then the silence. No food, no water, no interrogation. For 3 days. Some say this was inspired by the legalist belief that a prisoner's own thoughts are the most dangerous weapon. That a man left alone long enough, with only the echo of his choices, will do more damage than any whip. You agree. By the second night, you're talking to ghosts, old schoolmates, a childhood dog, that pebble again. By the third, your own voice is a stranger. Eventually, they lower you, and you're changed. Not broken, just bent, more pliable, which is perfect because the next chamber is the infamous balance trial. It's a room filled with scales, literal ones, dozens of stone platforms with narrow bases and delicate arms, each waiting for a prisoner to stand dead center. The catch: you're told to confess only as much as you think weighs the same as your guilt. Go over the platform tips, under still tips. Perfect balance, you're allowed to leave, but no one tells you how much anything weighs. A stolen apple, maybe 3 grams of shame. A lie under torture, 50. A rebellion, well, some scholars believe this was more psychological theatre than real measurement, but others point to hidden mechanisms in the base of the scales, suggesting they truly tracked micro movements in posture, voice, even sweat. You speak slowly, weighing each word, literally, and the scale doesn't tip. Not immediately, not until you mention your father's name. Then it sinks just slightly. But that's enough. You fail the trial. Next, you're taken to the room of echoed names. Here's how it works. Your name is spoken aloud once, then you're made to repeat it over and over, while a scribe behind you whispers other names into a conch-like horn that feeds sound back into your ear. At first, it's just confusing, but after an hour, you don't know which name is yours anymore. It's subtle, creeping, like fog. You start second-guessing syllables. You ask them to repeat the name they said, and they say, but that was your voice. This was meant to simulate identity erosion, a legalist tool designed to disorient a prisoner's sense of accountability. If you aren't sure who you are, can you be sure what you did? You stumble out of the room mumbling your old school title and a market nickname from years ago. That's when they give you the mark of compliance. It's not a scar or brand, those were for earlier prisoners. This one is a gesture. A coded movement you're made to memorize. A flick of 2 fingers, a bow at a certain angle. The catch: you're told it's now the only way to get food or speak without punishment. If you forget it, you're silenced. Some fringe texts claim this code evolved over time, passed from prisoner to prisoner like a secret handshake. Others think it was randomized to prevent solidarity. Either way, it works. You don't eat for a day after misremembering. You learn fast, and then you're blindfolded. Because now finally you're headed to the Whisper Vault. You've heard of this one. Everyone has. A place where confessions are stored, not written down, not carved, but whispered into a cavity carved deep beneath the earth. You're expected to lean close and say your final truth. And here's the weirdest part. The air responds. No joke. When you speak, a faint wind exhales back cold, damp, almost a sigh. Prison law says the vault is alive, that it doesn't record your words, it digests them. You whisper anyway, because you're tired, because it's part of the script, because some part of you thinks maybe the vault does understand. You say something short, 4 words, and for the first time in weeks, maybe months, you feel lighter. Not happy, not innocent, just no longer trying to hold everything in. The air exhales one last time, and you're led away, this time not underground. You're taken to a small courtyard. It's dusk. Birds circle overhead, probably hoping for scraps. And the guards, they leave you alone. No bells, no questions. You just sit there and you wait. You don't know what comes next, but you know it's close. Your knees still ache. The pebble is still gone. But your name, whatever it is now, feels distant. And the stars overhead, they're real this time, and watching. The next morning starts with a bowl of warm rice porridge and something even stranger kindness. No ropes, no blindfold, no shouts. The guard who delivers your meal sets it down with a nod, then leaves without a word. You stare at the steam curling from the bowl, half expecting it to vanish like a trick of the mind. But it doesn't, and as you eat slowly, cautiously, each mouthful reminds you of a life before this labyrinth of shadowed punishments. Don't get too comfortable though, because this is the polite phase and its name is a lie. This phase, rare and rarely survived, is when they pretend you're free. You're given clean clothes, brushed cotton, plain but soft. You're offered a shallow bath, tepid but refreshing, even a comb for your hair, all of it under the watch of silent guards who seem far too calm. You're taken to a small chamber lit with warm lanterns and lined with scrolls. A scribe sits across from you. He smiles. "Tell me your story," he says from the beginning. It seems harmless, therapeutic even. You almost want to open up. But here's the catch: every version of your story you tell is compared to the first one you gave under duress. Not the truth. Just whatever came out of you that first tortured night. And if anything contradicts even a date, even a name, you're flagged as a composite unreliable. That means another trial, another loop. This whole thing, a trap designed to expose those who've built too strong a coping mechanism. If you're too articulate, too composed, too clever, it's suspicious. Historians still argue whether this phase was standard practice or reserved for high-status captives. Some believe it was a perverse experiment in empathy testing, whether a tortured man could rehumanize and how fast. You barely remember your first confession, so you tread carefully. You keep things vague. You mirror the scribe's expressions. You answer slowly, as if unsure to seem less threatening. It seems to work, for now, but then comes the inversion chamber. This one's legendary not because of pain, but because of disorientation. You're led into a room where everything is reversed. Floor tiles arranged in mirror patterns. Candles placed upside down in ceiling sockets that reflect off polished bronze, creating the illusion that flames are under your feet. Writing appears backward on scrolls. Water drips upward from basins using some trick of tension and suction. It's not magic, it's geometry and cunning design, but it feels supernatural. In this space, you're instructed to walk, read, write, and speak. Simple tasks, except your brain short-circuits every time you try. The goal, to make you question your own perception. If up can be down, and words can mean their opposite, then maybe your entire experience is flawed. Maybe guilt is just a matter of angle. One fringe theory even suggests the room had a rotating floor mechanism to simulate subtle gravitational shifts. Another believes prisoners were dosed with herbs beforehand, mildly hallucinogenic, just enough to heighten confusion. You don't know what's real anymore. At one point, you catch your own reflection in a warped bronze panel. You wave at it, it doesn't wave back. You don't stay long. But when you leave, the corridors seem less trustworthy. You test each step like it might collapse. They take you next to a quiet hallway with doors on either side. This is the corridor of echoes. You're told nothing. You just walk, and behind each door something plays an old laugh, a single sob, a snatch of poetry, a whisper of your name in a voice you miss. None of it's real. Or maybe it's recorded from prior prisoners, or from your earlier confessions. But it knows you too well. Each door you pass slows your steps. Each sound draws a memory up from the murk of your mind. The corridor has no end. You just stop walking when you can't anymore. That's the test. How far can you go before your past catches up? You pause at the 12th door. The whisper behind it sounds like your mother. You're not sure what that means about you, but it feels like truth. From there, you're brought to the harmony trial. This one on paper seems gentle. A game of rhythm. You're seated in a stone circle with 6 other prisoners. A beat is tapped out wooden sticks on a bronze drum, and you're expected to repeat it in perfect unison. That's it. Failing doesn't bring lashes or chains. Just cold stares. And eventually exile from the circle. But you want to stay. Because this is the only time in months you've felt connected to others. Even the guards seem less monstrous under that shared rhythm. But here's the cruel twist. Every pattern they give is mathematically impossible to sustain without one person breaking it. Always. The rhythms are based on prime beats purposely misaligned. So someone will always fall out of step and everyone else watches them go. You last 3 rounds. Not bad, but not enough. You're pulled out gently and returned to your cell. Only it's not your cell. It's the silent room. No walls, no ceiling, just space, black fabric, endless and smothering. You can't see more than a few feet. Sounds don't carry. It's a trick of acoustics and light, sure, but it works. You're alone with nothing but your breath. And in that space, the question you've avoided finally catches you. What would you have done differently? There's no answer. Just breathing and blinking. And finally, peace. Sort of. A fragile kind. Because this is where the real purpose of Qin torture methods emerges. Not to break you for information, not always to punish you for guilt, but to unmake you piece by piece, and then see what builds itself in the wreckage. Are you still you, or someone new? It's almost dawn again when they come. A final walk. They don't tell you where you're going, but it doesn't matter anymore. You follow. Because now, whether you're released, judged forgotten, or transformed, you've passed through the full cycle. The bamboo cells, the balance trials, the vaults of whispers and mirrors and illusions. This was never about punishment. It was always about transformation. And now, you're ready for the last phase. The next step, whatever that means, and whether it's sunrise or sunset that greets you when the final gate opens. You finally understand what every former prisoner meant when they said, "It's not the pain you remember, it's who you were before." The final gate creaks open, not with grandeur, but with the soft, weary groan of something that's moved 1,000 times too many. You step through blinking against the morning light that isn't morning at all. Just a cleverly positioned lantern simulating dawn in the high-vaulted exit corridor. Of course it is. Everything in this place has been theatre. And now curtain call. You're met by a man in deep brown robes, different from the guards. His head is shaved clean, and his face bears no malice. He gestures for you to follow with a faint tilt of the head, not a word spoken. And just like that, you're in the cleansing garden. The name might make it sound peaceful. It's not. This isn't a garden in the botanical sense. It's a psychological labyrinth of gravel patterns, spiraled stepping stones and benches made of petrified wood. You're told quietly, respectfully, that you must complete a walking meditation before you may leave. No instruction, no guidance, just walk. The trick? The stones underfoot are arranged so that any deviation from a strict mental pattern causes imbalance. A single distracted thought and your path crumbles, not physically, but perceptually. You find yourself walking in circles, ending where you started, literally and metaphorically. Historians still argue whether this so-called garden was a meditative act of mercy or the final cruel test. Was it meant to grant closure or push minds over the edge, right at the finish line? The answer likely depends on who you ask and how they left. You try to focus. Left foot, pause, breathe in. Right foot, pause, breathe out. Again and again, the sounds around you, the crunch of gravel, the wind-touched chimes, the breath in your chest, they all start to blur into one long, low hum. It's almost musical. You think you found the rhythm. Then a memory bubbles up, one you thought was buried in the silent room. And just like that, the path shifts. You're back at the beginning. Somewhere a stone chime rings, soft, judgmental. Try again. And so you do. For hours, for days, time doesn't apply here. It's measured in heartbeats and déjà vu. Eventually, when your mind stops pushing and your steps find their own path, you feel a strange click beneath your foot. One last stone recessed. You've triggered something. A doorway opens in the bamboo wall. No ceremony, no applause, just permission. You step through expecting sunlight, but instead, you're met with a small chamber. Inside a long table, a single candle, and one object, a wooden mask. The guide, still silent, nods toward it. You lift it. It's smooth-rounded with no eye holes. A ceremonial judge's mask worn by those who observe trials from the shadowed alcoves. You saw them at least once or twice before the fire room, before the wall of names. Now you're the one who wears it. This isn't release. It's succession. A fringe theory, dismissed by many, suggests that some prisoners, those who endured the full cycle, were offered roles within the system itself. Not as guards, not as torturers, but as passive witnesses. Those who judged, silently drawing on first-hand understanding. You place the mask on your face. It's warm, not from the room, but from use. You're not the first, and as the mask settles, muffling your senses, softening the edges of the world, the candlelight flickers, once, then steadies. The guide leaves. You're alone. And somehow it's enough. The mask does not come off. Not now, not yet. Because now you see what they see. You are what they were. And soon, someone else will be led through the gate. and you'll be watching. The cycle continues. The Qin Dynasty is long gone, yes, but its echo still walks in minds like yours, still whispers in rooms that no longer exist, still balances on scales that never quite tip. Because what they created wasn't just a penal system, it was an identity machine. It didn't erase you, it remade you. And here you are changed, still breathing, still thinking, still you. So now as the dust of that long journey settles behind your eyes, let's let everything soften. No more corridors to walk, no more whispers to decode, no more trials to outlast, just stillness. Imagine the last flicker of that bamboo torch dimming behind you. The chill of stone replaced by warm blankets. The ache in your feet slowly melting into a gentle pulse of rest. What you've wandered through tonight isn't just a tale of pain, but of endurance, of ancient minds who believed that transformation could come not just through peace, but through trial. It's unsettling, sure, but it's also deeply, almost uncomfortably human. You made it, through smoke and mirrors, through tests and silence, through walls that talked back and floors that spun underfoot. And here you are now in your own quiet room, your own soft bed, hearing the wind press against the window pane like a breath from centuries ago. Let it pass. Let it carry the last echoes of that ancient world far, far from here. Back into the scrolls, back into the stone. You don't need to carry it anymore. You've witnessed it, and that's enough. Now close your eyes gently and let sleep rise like fog from the mountain forests of old China. Silent, steady, and full of calm. You're safe. You're home. And the gate behind you, it stays closed. End of script. Sweet dreams.